All right, so we're going to talk about two things today. And this comes from a couple different conversations that we have been having recently. I'm going to put this in the chat. It's kind of a scoreboard for you to play along at home if you would like. So again, we have lots of new folks coming to Life Cycle Insights and lots of new folks on this call. And then we have a lot of folks that have been life cycling for a while. And we're seeing a lot of, I'll say, leveling up of business reviews as we get more mature in the process. And we've had folks ask in tickets, on calls, really, what should we do first? What should we do next? And how can we really take a good look at our process and what we're doing? So what's interesting is we get folks that have not done QBRs before. We get other folks that have done QBRs in other platforms and have a process in place and want to know how it fits in Lifecycle Insights. So if you're brand new to QBRs, we may be starting at level 1 right from the beginning, and we want to talk through those pieces. And if you've done QBRs before and are fitting into the process, you might say, oh, I really want to start here in level 2, and we can talk through that. And then as it matures, I know we've got some very mature MSPs on the call that have been doing business reviews. I see folks that have participated in conversations around customer goals, et cetera, that really have hit the level 3 pieces and have started to wean away from how much they even talk about some of the level 1 pieces in business reviews. So I think there's a lot of conversation we can have around here. Alex and I would love for it to be a conversation for sure. Although either one of us can talk to a wall if we need to and entertain ourselves. We prefer not to do that.
I feel like I've done a lot of that in the last 2 weeks. So,
So my thinking is I put the link in the chat. Actually, Mark, you might, if you have the ability to repost it in the chat. I know when new folks come in, they lose the old pieces. So you should be able to download this and save it. You can print it out if you're like me and like to do things with a pencil and paper. If you're Alex, you can put it on your iPad and use your Apple Pencil. Or if you want to convert to some fancy Adobe, it's not even PDF converter. You can just make a copy in Google and type right in the doc, however you want to do it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is this business review maturity model. And then Marlon, who's on the call, had said, could we also talk about reports? So the second thing we're going to talk about is how this fits into what the components are in Report Builder, and maybe how to define different templates for your different segments. So we'll kind of talk about that as well. So let's look at level 1. And Alex, I thought we'd maybe talk about some of the best practices that you talked about in the Build It presentation around the pieces that folks can automate first and the inventories. So my thinking was, with this checklist, folks might want to go through and say, okay, in the inventories, that top component, are you doing warranty lookups? Are you checking your data quality? Are you doing true asset lifecycle management? And then what are you doing around user reporting? These are the pieces we automate. So if you are new to the platform and you have manually done these, you probably want to check off that these can all be automated or put these on your to-do list, is my thinking. So Alex, do you want to talk about inventories and what's driving folks to do these inventories?
Well, I think a big chunk of what's driving it right now is the fact that insurance companies are wailing.
Cybersecurity liability insurance companies.
Yeah. Until this year, the driver was that every compliance obligation ever says that you must know who and what you support, which includes inventorying your users, inventorying your assets. So I've always been a huge fan of, even if these aren't part of the discussion you're going to have with your customer, deliver them to your customer and tell them, hey, you need to have this so that when your auditor comes asking, or when you have to check a box on a PCI compliance survey or whatever, even if it's not audited and checked, you can honestly say, not only do I have it, but it's updated quarterly. My MSP and I work on this on a regular basis. But for right now, yes, your insurance company is going to be the bigger driving factor. Yeah. And probably for the foreseeable future. I mean, every conversation at CompTIA about legislation was legislators won't get to it as fast as the insurance companies. I heard a stat from the oh, what is the name of their company? Data something or other. Anyway, one of the Data Stream Insurance. They gave a stat that one of the major insurance carriers actually doubled their cybersecurity revenue last year by adding 0 new customers. They literally just charged everybody double for their cyber insurance, and in most cases cut the coverage. So these guys,
I can believe that.
yeah. I was talking to an MSP who had a $10 million policy. And he says, we know we won't be able to get it next year. So next year we'll have a $5 million policy that costs the same as our old $10 million policy.
I actually bet I know that human that you
Yep, you probably do.
yeah. That reminds me, because you mentioned that, one of the things that one of our partners and partners in crime as well has done for us is the team at Fifth Wall combined. They worked with 35 cybersecurity liability insurance carriers, and they kind of aggregated all of the questions from their policies and built an assessment that they let us post in Lifecycle Insights. So if you go into assessments, into managed assessment templates, you have access to this. So you can see they've done, and honestly, when we talk to people on demos and we say we have this, people say, oh, you just saved me 35 hours of my own time because I was going to build this myself. So if you have not taken a look at this, you can import it into your site. You can download it. Of course, you can edit it and make it your own, like all of our other assessments. But I do think it's good to know that this is this is aggregated information from an insurance carrier. Is that fair to say? Is that fair to call?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, some of the questions are combined or consolidated. I'd call it consolidated and aggregated information. So, 10 to 5 carriers each answer a question ask a question a different way. The smart guys over there consolidated that down into one question. So it's about 55 points that you got to touch on to make sure that your customers are ready for their insurance renewal.
But they all, when Dustin came and talked on the call, the inventories were just, you have to be doing these things.
It's table stakes today. Everyone has to be doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is our thinking with the top there for level 1 of baseline, that, and they don't necessarily have to be discussed, right? The conversation is that we must know that there's a process in place. The process must be followed. Somebody needs to be checking it monthly and documenting it, but you don't have to have a call around it. So it's not that it has to be reported on in a business review. They just need to know, that the company needs to be assured that their managed service provider is doing this. So I know that as you level up your business review and want to talk about business goals, et cetera, that an exciting inventory of, all of the assets is not what you want to be discussing. It just needs to be documented and taken care of.
Yep.
So level 2, and some folks come to Lifecycle Insights wanting to build risk assessments first. We say onboarding can be a choose your own adventure. If you want to start at risk assessments, you absolutely can. But a piece of, if you're just building the process from the ground up, making sure your data coming over is accurate is a part of cleaning up, your asset and user inventories, et cetera.
Well, accurate data there will answer 10 questions in your assessment process. So even if you're at a rush to get that first risk assessment out the door, a lot of data points rest in those user and asset inventories.
Yeah. So Alex, I'm just gonna, we could go through this one at a time, but since it's very much all of the pieces and parts of what we do, what in level 2, maybe did you hear at CompTIA this week where there was a new focus, or this is the focus to build a technology roadmap aligned to an assessment and a budget?
Well, yeah, I think the focus is on all the things that the insurance is driving, which, the technology roadmap just helps you enable them. But, we can't be running out of data equipment. We can't be running, old architecture, old infrastructure. MFA, of course, is a hot button topic everywhere you go. And a lot of those just check a checkbox as you work your way through the assessment. So, it's a matter of, and one of the conversations they had was, if you have a breach, or if you've had a breach, you're more reinsurable. And if you've not only can state that you're doing the work, have a roadmap, have a plan of action, and then actually can show that you're doing it. So, that's that's part of that process. James is asking if we recommend a single SRA like HIPAA or HIPAA plus LCI, or just HIPAA if his client requires HIPAA. I would say that you should do two in that situation. Don't commingle what you do for the client with your own best practices, most supportable configuration type stuff. Don't conflate that with what comes out of a HIPAA assessment, because if you ever get audited, you want that audit to be super clean, right to the point. Like, hey, we did exactly the 52 steps in HIPAA. Boom, here they are. Oh, and by the way, I make sure they run my favorite brand of firewall or antivirus or whatever. But it checks the box for HIPAA is a whole other question. That's about putting yourself in a defensible position if you ever have an audit. Most of the questions, you'll answer a lot of those questions twice, and that's okay. They'll be much easier to answer the second time.
The other piece that I think we get asked about a lot more often is the difference between asset tracking as an asset versus a license.
Yeah. So, and I was talking to somebody about this morning. Assets are the physical thing. The licenses, I'm going to call it a virtual thing, but it may or may not be. I'm so old that there was a day when a license was a dongle that attached to something that actually determined.
I think Dave might be that old too, judging from that.
Yeah. Well, it was a thing. It was a thing. But typically a license is a virtual thing. The difference as far as when you're tracking it though goes to is it something that is one and done? You buy it and then you don't pay for it again for 3 years, and when you do, you get a brand new copy and you throw the old one away, right? That old perpetual license. Or the recurring license that happens on a monthly, yearly, with some of these things where people are buying 3 or 5 year licenses. There's some weird stuff when you get into support agreements or licensing for different devices. If it's a one and done thing, you buy it once and you throw it away, track it as an asset, create a configuration in your PSA, track the asset. When you're done with it, pitch it. Delete the configuration, go create a new one for next year's product. It's going to have a different license key. It's going to have a different termination date. All the data is going to be slightly different. So take the 2 minutes to create a new configuration for it. Those are easy because they get an end of life date. You can account for them on the budget pretty easily, and they just go away. So if it's a one-time purchase, or sometimes even a one-time purchase plus a little bit, and don't lose your license dongle. If it's a license one-time purchase or a one-time purchase and an annual renewal, sometimes you can put those in as a configuration. If they're going to be a recurring regular cycle bill, then go out and create them as a contract. Those are going to be much easier for you to handle. But QuickBooks is my favorite example, right? We buy it into it, gives us 3 years of tax table updates and a lifetime worth of headaches. That's one that you buy it. When you're done with it, you toss it. QuickBooks Online is a subscription. You're going to pay for it for I don't know. I don't even know what it costs anymore. $40 a month or something like that per user. Way too much money. And you're going to get that wonderful headache forever. Oh, it's licensed per QuickBooks Desktop is now licensed per year. See how old I am?
Yeah.
I'm showing my rust now.
Yeah, people are not happy about that at all.
I'll be honest.
I'm surprised there's still a desktop edition. So
I do my books for my husband's landscape business, and I left QuickBooks Online and made my accountant do it because I refused to pay the online ransom. I just said I'm not. It wasn't really ransom, right? But it felt that way.
Yeah.
Alex, the QuickBooks Online is so horrible. They have no choice but to hold on to the desktop because there's so many things that you can't do with the online that you can with the desktop.
Yeah.
Right. The features.
Yeah.
I have heard it. I have not been the victim yet.
I have lived it, and that is why someone else does it for me.
Yeah.
And that's really only for the pro license. The accountant version and the enterprise versions are all still one-time fee per year.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that just makes it so much easier to track.
The beauty of being able to add the contract in, I mean, even if it's yearly, you can still add it as a recurring cost as opposed to a one-time configuration in manage, in your PSA, et cetera. So that is I'm trying to show the screens that we're talking about.
Yeah, we solve for a lot of weird problems here, right? The copier company that bills you for page counts quarterly. the annual bill, the every 3-year bill, you know, those kind of weird things. You can solve for all of those in the contract section. It's an underutilized piece of the tool, something that folks should certainly pay attention to. It fills out that budget and gives your customer real total cost of ownership that makes this just so much easier.
Yeah. Any questions from folks on, I think in 2 weeks, our weekly call is about the budgets and contracts. So if you're thinking, I really want to dive into how to do that, first, again, if you help, welcome if you want it right now. But if you want to join the new to LCI in 2 weeks, that is the topic du jour for that. Anything else in this section, and kind of leveling up, that comes top of mind for Alex or anybody else on the call? Any questions about any of these pieces?
I think it might be good. We have a lot of folks here who probably know this, but we probably should go over the 2 different ways that we show the technology roadmap. Obviously, one way goes towards you guys doing the roadmap for your customer. The other way is kind of internal, but I want to take Matt's question real quick.
Okay.
VMware has a purchase price, but you then buy an annual maintenance that you'll keep keep the license current. How would you track that? I would say this, Matt, if you expect to have to buy a new license when you renew the hardware, then include that cost in your in the asset that it runs on, the VMware host or whatever. If you have annual maintenance that you literally pay every year, it really should be a contract, because the warranty feature, and you could track it as a asset with a warranty renewal, but you're only going to be able to budget out 2 years for that, because the warranty renewal cost, the way it works on the budget is there's the price of the asset, warranty expiration date will roll over and create a warranty renewal cost. But again, that's only good for one renewal. It won't just assume that it's going to happen yearly or every 2 years or every 3 years. It's a one and done thing. So if you buy the asset this year, you have to pay the renewal license cost next year. Year 3 gets lost. So we'll always be, the further out your budget gets, you get into that whole, getting less accurate as you get further out there.
And you can absolutely associate a contract to an asset. So
the asset.
You have the hardware itself, and to Alex's point, if you've got that warranty or the license that's going to be ongoing,
yep,
you can create it here. You can also, if the asset doesn't cost anything, right, you can zero out the replacement cost and still associate a license to it.
Yep.
I think
so that might be your data cost or something like that with an appliance that you're going to pay for and your customer's never going to get the bill for.
It's interesting. A lot of the asset lifecycle management has turned into contract management, licensing management along the way, as everything's moving from hardware to hardware as a service or cloud based pieces. So we're seeing a lot more. It's interesting because we have just started to look at the numbers for contracts coming in, and many, many more folks are adding contracts into the platform because their assets are turning into contracts. The other piece, as we talk through this, I put some titles at the top here. We're currently doing this. Have we automated it? There are 2 pieces. Is one of these tasks something you can delegate? So Kevin's not on this call, but we've had Kevin Elsing from Team Elbow on before, where he's talked with Alex about their standard operating procedure, right, for how they build their QBRs. And a lot of these pieces they've been able to delegate to an intern, a tier 1 tech that can do data cleanup, etc. So I put a column in there for delegate, thinking you might want to take notes of, is this something I could delegate to another resource, right? If I can't automate it, can I delegate it? Again, I always say my grocery shopping sure felt automated when my kids did it for me, but now that I'm an empty nester, I have to go back to doing it myself. So I can neither automate nor delegate. So thinking about how to use this list to develop your standard operating procedure. Okay. So Ben said, I might have missed this, but how do we automate data quality, especially with the items missing something? So we wish that it could all be automated for sure, but there are pieces where you are going to actually have to do the work. Absolutely. We do have our data quality recording our data quality recording, our our weekly call for onboarding around data quality gives 5 steps that you'll want to walk through. I'll tell you the highlights of them. The first of which is looking at your duplicates and making sure you can typically identify that your RMM's grabbing one version of an asset and somebody's manually entered in a second version. You can't automate the removal of one of them, but it's fairly easy to identify where that is coming from, so you can eliminate the duplicates. Another piece around data quality is Alex's point around the virtual machines and creating licenses or deciding something is an asset. So there's some cleanup to do around that. And then the other piece, and one of our partners is the one that requested this, they found that they could get their data quality above an 80, but they were frustrated because they didn't care about printers and they wanted them off of their data quality score. And I'm not talking about the managed printers that Alex was talking about, right? The RICOs where you're getting page counts with licenses. You want to track that. I'm talking about the desktop one that when, that's going to print till it dies, and then someone's going to, they're going to spend $120 on a new one. So that is why we have the asset type policies. And in the asset type policy, you might have 2 printer categories. You might have managed printer and printer. And in printer, you could say, I don't want to include these in the missing end of life date or the warranty expiration date. So that can help bump up data quality score. I would say cleaning up what you're tracking in the asset list is one of the best ways to clean up data quality, because it's not that you're missing the critical data, it's you've got a lot of extra data that you shouldn't be counting at all. Alex, what are you seeing with the folks that you've onboarded recently?
Well, I think that's definitely a valid point. There's definitely some help that can be made there. If you can't automate it, I will say you can absolutely delegate it, right? This is tier 1 and intern work. It wasn't my MSP. It should be at yours. But the tools are getting better too. So I would say the portions of it that you can automate, make sure you have our warranty APIs and all dialed in, right? Well, if you give us make, model, and serial, we'll fill in purchase date, warranty expiration date, end of life date, that kind of stuff. Warranty lookups by default is on, but you've got to go configure Meraki and SmartNet. So if you have Cisco devices, make sure you've configured those. Also, consider third-party products. Auvik does a great job of inventorying your network. So does Domots. And if it can throw data back into your PSA that's right, it'll clean up and fix things that you don't already have. Above and beyond that, LionGuard, now that they have their Windows Endpoint Inspector, my goodness, it can inspect just about everything on your network. It is work to get it right, but that's the point of automation, is to put the work in up front so that you don't have to do it on the back end. So between API integrations and then third-party tools like Auvik and Domots and LionGuard, you really get into a situation where some automation can happen, even on those weird things that don't have a typical RMM agent installed on them. But Kevin's point was perfect, and it was Kevin Elsing that I think that did that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because he wanted to delegate it, and he wanted to be able to say, as a intern or as a non-technical person, I need you to have a metric. I need you to know you're going to get to 100%, and that's your metric. That's your number. That's your North Star. He was going to go in and tweak some settings so that he could make 100% realistic and an attainable goal for somebody without them having to chase down the serial number for a brother MFP. Yeah,
he uses asset type policies and said, I expect, let me get back to my dashboard. I expect when I filter this by server and workstation that it's at 100.
Yeah.
That was part of their KPIs.
Yep. So there's ways to handle that. Ron, I'd like to talk about the policy piece, because I'm not sure I understand how that impacts data quality. I can understand why it would give you some poor scoring on things like a risk assessment if you didn't have the right answers, but I'm not sure I totally understand what you got there.
When we do the assessments, there's a section in the assessments for the policies, and they never seem to have the policies.
Yep.
So we always mark them off on the policies, and I always get to everybody. None of them have policies. We try to get them to do policies and procedures, and they're like, I don't care.
They
Right.
won't care until the insurance company comes asking for them, and then they'll start to care. And then you should document and say, well, remember when we talked about this 6 months ago and 12 months ago and 18 months ago? Well, let's go talk about that policy engagement. I don't see us doing an integration with Compliancy Manager, mostly because I don't know enough about them to really know what they do and what they do well. So there's some conversation certainly that could be had there.
I'll give you some updates because I just signed up with them, so
Okay,
I'll keep you posted.
keep me posted.
Well, one of the things we do, Alex, for customers who need to be accountable, is making sure that they're accountable. If we make recommendations, we put, you have the option in there that says declined.
Yep.
And making sure that we do document that. So
And you should bring those declined
if-
recommendations back on the roadmap every quarter. Like, hey, we still think you need to do this. You said no, and we respect that, but.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something that we plan on doing, is using that a lot more, of saying, here we go, we made these recommendations, but
So it's funny you mentioned that, because Scott on the call this week was saying, I want to show the recommendation roadmap, and I'm going to change the reporting options to just show declined in our demo site.
So he's just showing the ones that.
But one of the components of Report Builder, he just wants to have a whole page of, I told
Here's
you,
the stuff I told you to do that you
don't need
wouldn't
to do
do.
this.
I like it.
Just every time he's documenting. So it's a single component of Report Builder is
I
just.
think we already used the word defensible position earlier today. A lot of it goes back to that. I hate that MSPs have to manage to that to this point, but it's true. And when Greg and Trisha talked to us about, putting things in the customer perspective by using client goals, one of the things that they talked about was accountability. And I don't remember if it was Trisha or Greg. I think it was Trisha. It was actually assigning who's responsible for this task. So when something gets sent home as a take home, does that belong to me as the MSP? Does it belong to the customer? I know one of the hardest things for me was going, okay, we agreed that this is going to happen leaving the meeting. I'm going to do 2/3 of it. And Mr. Customer, I need you to carry 1/3 of the water. And we get back to the next meeting and I've done my part and they haven't done theirs. So, there's a lot that can be done around, and Trisha had a pretty good, or Greg, whoever it was, had a pretty good method for documenting it right there in their little spreadsheet of client goals, who's responsible, who's accountable at the end of the day. So Jill's asking about policy templates. Be really careful with policy templates. I am not an expert by any stretch, but the best quote that I'm going to steal from Matt Lee was, who's way smarter than me, a better policy guy than me, was that a very simple, what we actually do policy is way better than the fanciest copy replace policy downloaded off the internet, because what you're going to find is that, and Matt was a little more descriptive and entertaining in this description, but what you're going to find is that I go download the sans.org policy. It says I do all of these things, and I just find a replace and put my name in it. And then when I have a breach, when I have an event, the issue is that we can go back and look at the policy, and the policy isn't what we actually do. And there's actually a case right now where Travelers is suing a company who said we have a multi-factor authentication policy, and the policy says it goes on everything. They checked that little checkbox in their insurance documentation that said, yes, we have multi-factor on everything, and there's a policy around it. And then Travelers went and looked, and their policy says they have it on everything, but they really only had it on VPN at the firewall. And now Travelers is suing this company for $10 million to get out of their obligations and to cancel their cyber insurance, because that company essentially misinformed them, and they didn't follow their own internal policy, which makes them almost uninsurable. So be careful with those. Templates are great, but make sure you strip out anything that is not what you actually do.
Happening. Yeah.
Hey, Alex, something on that line that we started doing in the policy section for the assessments is under the how to score or remediation. For all the policy ones, I started writing down what our company standards are that just are automatically going to apply. So like we patch all of our clients on Saturday nights for their servers. We patch Tuesday or Wednesday for their workstations. I just started writing down the actual procedures that we do.
Yep.
Right there that would automatically apply because they're our client, and tell them, look, this is what you're getting as a technical control. this might help you write that policy. And I've seen more of my customers latch on to trying to write a policy once I told them some of the stuff we're already doing.
That's awesome. I really like that. And it gives them the starting point. I heard a really good comment this week in one of the sessions that I attended, and that was that the difference between policy and procedure. Policy is what the board of directors needs to read. Procedures is what the people at the bottom need to know how that they're doing and how to do it. Right. So I think that's fantastic. You're giving them the procedure, that part that is operational, the what buttons do we click when and how, what do we do to make sure this is taken care of. But at the board level, you have to have management intent that says the intent of this policy is to protect us by patching our systems and making sure that we're running the most secure version of everything out there. That leadership intent has to be established in the policy, and then they can link to your procedures that say, hey, and in support of this. And I love the phrase technical controls, because I've been back and forth with a lot of folks about the use of the word control. More on that at a later date. But the technical control that says this is how we know we're doing what we say we're doing in our policy. Love that. So just be careful with the procedure, with the policy part. Make sure that it actually describes what they do, because policies are iterative too. If you look at policy from a high level, any policy that's over a year old and hasn't been updated will actually not be validated by an auditor. The auditor is going to throw it out and say this policy is no longer relevant. It hasn't been updated in over a year. So those policies have to be reviewed. Even if there are no changes, they need to have a change log that says reviewed on this date, no changes. And that should be kind of the bottom line of the policy, is that change log that shows when and how it was all done.
So I love Tanner put in the chat, we have one of Elbow's interns in the house. So
Nice.
I'm glad you chimed in, Tanner.
Yep.
This is who we were talking about earlier, that they've written SOPs, and they have quite as a matter of fact, Tanner was on that webinar with us. If folks want to listen about the SOP conversation, and chatted about how he does the work and how they really do data quality checks for one, and then you can see what they're doing with their asset type policies, et cetera. So I'm glad you put that in the chat, Tanner. Thank you. And then I pulled up on the screen the explanation remediation tip area, which is what Greg was talking about in terms of where he documents, what their policies and practices are. So that I think that's great to help, clients build their own policies. So as we work our way to level 3, I really think the focus here is around looking longer term, segmenting your clients. As a matter of fact, one of the pieces, I have another doc to share that will be around segmenting. So Alex and I talk a lot about segmenting the client base, right? Who gets a high touch, a medium touch, a tech touch model. In the platform, under scheduler, you can decide who gets, monthly, annual, semi-annual, quarterly, et cetera, business reviews. So that's a piece of it. How often are we going to meet with them? But then thinking about what we're going to do for each of those segments, right? We mentioned it right out of the gate. Everybody needs to have the asset inventory and the user inventory. But again, you're not going to meet with the client that's only paying you $1,000 a month every month to show them their asset inventory. So are you going to, you need to have a plan in place for those. Are you going to email it to them? Are you just going to store it for them? Let them know that you have it as part of the policy, and then yearly talk about any changes in it. You need to have a policy for each of the segments so that you're following the best practices around that. Tracking customer health. I know a lot of folks on the call have our customer success platform and are looking at different assessments that they use, different components around customer health. And while many folks are using the risk assessments around standards and best practices, using the stack alignment component to really track opportunity is a more mature way to look at that, or an additional way to look at the same information. And then the focus being on customer goals, right? If you are new to us and you have not watched the weekly workshop where Trisha and Matt and Greg talk about how they drive customer business outcomes with aligned technology projects, I will highly encourage that. Mark, could you go in our YouTube channel and
I'm already on it.
Okay.
I got it.
Never mind. I should have seen your eyes go up, and if I could
Right.
get it
You
slightly
can tell where
zoomed
you
in,
can tell where that monitor is.
well,
Yeah.
if I could zoom in on your glasses, I probably could have seen that you were looking at it. So I think that one drives a lot of value in terms of, the goal is to drive business outcomes, and you do that with technology initiatives, as opposed to, I was really hoping to drive some more XDR, BDR, flux capacitor, conversations. So I'm going to put another link in the chat, and you should be able to copy this one as well. And this one is the components of most of the components that are listed in Report Builder. So Marlon, when you said, could we talk about reports? What I wanted to do here was, let's talk about, we always show the scrolling list of all of the components. But my thinking was, if you really looked at your clients by where they fall, are they a high touch, medium touch, low touch? That's the way I categorized it, although I might make that a tech touch for the last column. My thinking was, what you can create a template for each of these types, and what would you want to report with all of those folks regularly, right? So it could be, you might want to change this to monthly, quarterly, annually. I know Kirk hopped off the call, but that's how he does it, right? They have monthly components that they follow, they have quarterly ones, and they have the large annual ones. But my thinking was, you might want to take notes on, does everybody need an asset report? I mean, I think that I won't type in here, so that those of you copying it don't have to get all of my all of the nonsense I'm going to put in here. But we just discussed everybody needs that. Maybe take some notes on, how are they going to get that? Everyone needs to have a user inventory. What are you going to do to make that happen, right? Who's going to do the work? How often are you going to report on this? What are the checks for it? And again, what do each of those segments get? Because they have, the interesting piece is, businesses that land in your low touch segment are probably smaller and don't have a single human that can talk to you about the user inventory once a week, right? So you need kind of different processes in place. So that was my thinking when I created this doc. Alex, I know you're looking at this for the first time since I built it about an hour ago. So I'm not going to expect you to have a prepared content on this particular slide. But what do you think? What advice would you give folks as they're looking at the components of Report Builder and building out maybe 3 different templates if they look at a low, medium, high model, or a monthly, quarterly, annual model?
Well, I think there's got to be a conversation around different versioning of a lot of these reports, because budget, for example, you'll show it a couple of ways.
I almost put in here, 2 different versions. I did put the app on there.
Yeah. Our most successful partners working on budgets are showing it 2 different ways, long-term and short-term. But I also think that there's some value under that other column, just to think about the things that you guys want to deliver that are custom to you, because coming out here and following our best practices to the T doesn't make you stand out. It doesn't keep for your customer what's unique about you. So make sure you keep those other components up to date. Trisha, I'm going to go back to Trisha and Greg as my poster child example. They're out there building out client goals. That is a function that didn't exist in the system, that that will eventually get to where they can dump it out of Report Builder into the system. But something that they came to us and told us that they needed. Every one of you has a customer who needs something different. If it's a review of a really fancy line of business application, we have partners that do ERP consulting, and at every QBR, they have to have an overview of the ERP consulting, where they're at on projects, where they're at on module usage, all this crazy stuff. Know your clients, know your vertical, and make sure that you don't just take our blank template and slap it into every vertical, whether it applies or whether it doesn't, because you'll get the best reception when you customize this to meet your client's needs, not just the really high level stuff that we do that is supposed to be broad and vertical agnostic. That's all my fancy conversations around it.
Oh, that was perfect. Yeah. So Marlon, you were the one that said, hey, can we have a chat about reports? So do you have a specific question, or just kind of wanted to see what are the reporting options that we have. I figured if I outline the components, typically you click on the, when we talk through it, right? I've clicked on it and said, here they are. It's like, okay, it seems like you have plenty, but then to talk through what folks are delivering.
I just wanted to get a feel of it because I have not run a report yet. So and that came up today with my boss.
Sure.
So I wanted to get a feel of it to see how we could do it. And also some other teammates of mine are on here.
Yep.
And I wanted them to understand as much as you're teaching me and all the time you're taking with me.
Sure. Yeah, no worries. Well, let me click into the report builder and show you what this looks like. I figured if you had a document of these are the pieces that we want to think about, that would make sense for the team to talk about which of these components do we want to include, how do we prioritize, and who's going to be in charge of building them. If you're in the platform, report builder is, and now any one of these reports, of course, can be built out singularly, but report builder lets you stack them in the order that you want to deliver them and keep them consistent. So as you start building, I can click on add component and grab, okay, I want the user list or the asset list. I just want the end of life assets, etc. So this is going to pre-filter by however you choose to swatch this list. So I said this is the end of life. It comes automatically just with the red selected and everything else unswatched. Again, Tanner's here, so I wouldn't be surprised if Tanner said I'm required to to do the server and workstations as a piece when you first work with a client. So you can build the reports in the order that you want. I can grab a user list as well. And I can, drag this around. This is how I reorder my list. So this user list, you can see, has the basic Microsoft 365 and ConnectWise. It'll hold your columns. So if you wanted to add the breach secure now columns in here, you can save it as that. So you can adjust your reports. Any of the reports that have the gears on them will let you switch, choose the columns that you want to work with. And, we were talking about that recommendation roadmap template. If I grab the recommendation roadmap, I could say, I want to show all the declined ones. Again, in my demo site, I don't have any declined, but you could use as a single component the declined recommendations. So they would have right in front of them, these are all of the ones that you've opted not to do.
And you can reuse a component. That's the important part here.
Yeah. So Alex mentioned having two different budgets, right? So I'm going to grab a budget and then I'm going to grab a budget again. And on the first one, I'm going to elect to do, I'll switch to the 12 months of assets, and I can rename this. So I don't want to chase down 3 budget forecasts. So 12-month budget assets. And then I could go into the second budget forecast and say, this one, I want to do my 6-year setting. And I can edit this and say 6-year budget. So
That reminds me, I found a bug late yesterday that I haven't reported yet. You can reuse everything in the report builder except augment. The augment template you cannot reuse.
So you can only do either the users or
If you show user or application, if you change one, it changes them both. And I'll get that turned in as a bug report today. I found it late yesterday while we were at booth time, and then I had to go do a presentation and then chase a plane down a runway. And yeah. So it was a busy end of the day yesterday. I didn't get to turn that one in, but.
Marnie, speaking of bugs, the asset one, you showed filtering to workstations. That global filter doesn't seem like it stays preserved.
You know what? I think you're right. I think I think the top filters don't preserve. They do down here. So you could probably save it. And I think did I put that in? Did I talk to you about this? I have talked to someone about this.
I don't think I did, but I think you're going to do what I found worked, which was I typed in the name of the type workstation, and that part stays preserved.
Yep. I already put in the ticket for the filter one, and when you said that, I thought, wait, was it you I was talking to? Good call. So that is how folks are grabbing the pieces and parts from this list. And my thinking was that you might want to, sometimes for me, it's easier to take notes on okay, do I want to include a ticket summary for everybody? Yes, I'll check it off. And then I could go, so if I had check boxes where low had 6 check boxes, I would go make a template that said, maybe level 1, level 2, level 3 of which of these components we're going to put together to build our business review. Any other pieces while we're in here? Comments, questions? I appreciate that everybody's given a lot of energy and conversation on a Friday afternoon.
You guys have some big changes for this coming on your roadmap, is that right?
We do. So I will pull up the roadmap. This is only Q2, Q3, so they've already started talking about what additional changes there will be in Q4. Have not published it yet. So that will probably be in 2 weeks. We'll be able to share that as well. So for roadmap, for report builder, 3 pieces. The first being the locker component. So the best way for us to describe this is when you're in assessments and you grab a template, right? You create that template and it just stays locked, and then you run an event across that template. That's the idea that report builder will be, that you will build the template and then you'll run an event against it so that it holds in time. And then the other piece will be a locker. So first, the template will solve for, right now you build a template and then as soon as you change companies, right, it doesn't save it as is, it just edits as you go. So the template will allow you to say, I'm using this template, I'm running against Creative Designs, now I'm running against this company without having to rename it. The second piece, the locker, will be to capture a point in time to say, I ran this on August 5th and my asset list looked like this, so that we can then check what did it look like on December 5th, to show the difference between the two. So it'll start by lockering it. So that's what they're thinking about there.
Those are great.
And then the other piece is what Alex mentioned, to be able to, so right now you can do goals in customer success. And we want to be able to just push the goals for a client to report builder. So we could say, you can see they've already put the plumbing in place for this. I want to show this to a customer, or I don't want to show it to a customer, including any of the individual components, so that then you would be able to, it'll automatically build a table similar to what you and Trisha talked about and Matt on that call, to have the goals as a component of report builder. So that's the other piece.
Say that was coming out? That coming quarter?
So they are starting to work on it now. I would bet we would complete most of that by the end of this year, but they're aiming to do the report lockering. It's next up. They've got some budget pieces, and then report blockers, the next big piece that they're going to work on.
Goals look really cool too.
Yes, that I think it's interesting. We're hearing more and more in the space. I always said QBRs were like the weather. Nobody was talking about it. I mean, everybody was talking about it. Nobody was doing anything about it. And now more and more folks are doing them. And now it's really the driving the business outcomes that we're hearing about. It's all about customer experience, customer success and outcomes, and the goals are what drive that conversation. So we hear less and less about patch stats and viruses and anti-spamming spam, and more about goals. I absolutely can share the link to Microsoft 365. We have just added this. So if you have not been in your user list recently, first, if you're seeing funny GUIDs, long strings of characters, there's an update you need to make. But we have a Microsoft 365 troubleshooting list, and we have really aggregated all the information around troubleshooting into this doc. So Adam, check that out. If that doesn't get the one that, if it doesn't have the piece that you needed, let me know and I can email you one later. Any other pieces? Okay, perfect, good. Any other pieces we want to talk through today?
I've already talked too much, but Marnie, I did have a question on
Sure.
the recommendation roadmap. when you toggle off recurring, so I don't want to show a recommendation to buy a monthly product like Umbrella for Endpoint, it'll show the items still repeated across every month or every year that I'm showing as $0, even though I said don't show it to me.
Oh, interesting. So zeroes out the cost, but it still shows the component.
It just shows it on the left-hand side, and then it makes the roadmap really busy with all the recommendations. It repeats huntress, 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 or in umbrella,
Okay.
umbrella, umbrella, or whatever it is.
Yep. Can you give me a screenshot of one of those and we'll put in a ticket?
I'll throw in a ticket.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. All right, Ben, general question. How many clients are all of you using VCIO for? We started slow and have done 4 reviews since May. Feel like it's a slow process. So folks, if you want to chime in and answer Ben's question, for sure, Ben, I think the more you do, the more folks scale. Many of our partners start with 5 and then scale up from there. I was going to say,
And the first one's the
until they're
hardest.
doing almost all of them, which is Trisha's response. So,
And Trisha doesn't work at a tiny MSP, so they're doing a lot. What the advice I'll give you, Ben, is that the first one's the hardest one for each customer, because that's the one that involves all the data cleanup and making all the initial recommendations. And once you have a long list of recommendations, once you have clean data and you're only having to account for the changes in the last 90 days or 6 months, and Trisha can tell us this better than me, but the more you train your techs to go back and clean up and put in clean data the first time, the easier it gets.
so sorry, go ahead.
And I'm curious how big some of these firms are, because we're 12 techs, and leadership is a small team, so it's pretty much me and the president of the company doing these, and mostly me doing the preparation. So I find that it's taking me between 2 and 3 hours per client to get everything ready, do the assessments, clean up, prepare the recommendations, and so on. And then once we've presented everything to the client, which so far we have 100% success rate and everybody loves what we're proposing, but then we have 4 weeks of work following that. So we can't then schedule another one right after that, because then we have to get caught up with our work so that we're not overloading our team.
So it sounds to me like you need to hire a bigger team if
That's what
if every time you go to a sales call you make money.
You should make more sales calls and hire.
I'm sorry.
It's a good problem to have. It's a
problem
good
to
kind
have.
of growth.
Life cycle insights, that sucks. We're making
Yeah.
too much money. We need to hire.
Yeah.
more.
You
All
don't have
right,
time to cash all the checks. I get it.
I'll tell my boss to call you guys and complain when payroll's to the roof.
So you can see, Ben, that they've put, we've got folks. Trisha again works at a very large MSP. James said, I'm a tiny one and we do all of them. Andrew commented our goal is to do 15 to 20 per VCIO. And I think Trisha's comment is really impactful. We have a direct correlation, the number of reviews per month and quote creations per month. It is absolutely one of the things that folks say drive.
When you show up in front of your customers, they ask you for stuff.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't
100%.
something you went to them asking for, they go to you and go, oh, by the way.
Yeah.
The other thing too is if you focus on recommendations in budget and don't get pulled into any of the rest of what you might typically talk about with tickets, assets, or even the details of the questions and the assessment that you're actually doing, don't focus there. Focus on your recommendations and on your budget. Everything else in that report and the assessments and everything that you have is just backup information that is showing them why they need to move forward with those recommendations. If you can get your customers to agree and follow through on a plan, in the beginning, maybe you're not going to do them quarterly until you get a process running internally within your organization. Maybe do annual or biannual reviews with them, but then you have to have a strong account manager or salesperson, unless that is you as well, who can do checkpoints and just, kind of reinforce everything it is that you had in that meeting prior.
Yeah, makes sense.
Trisha, do you track recommendations ever that are $0?
We do. So we have what we call our quick wins. Quick wins are the first thing we always talk about with customers, and that is everything that they should be doing that we will do for them for free that's covered under their contract. That's where we
Love that.
start every single recommendation, and then we bring up the stuff that we need to charge them for.
And a lot of that stuff is easy too, right? Because you've done that same thing for 20 other customers. So it's go click the button, turn on the thing. Our project team is good at
Yeah.
it. They can whip through it pretty quick, you know. So
Mhm.
those are a good one. And it starts the customer in the mindset of not everything you bring them is expensive.
Yeah, and it really kind of focuses on that you're trying to help them meet their business outcomes through technology, and you're really partnering with them. And that, that's the important message that you want to give them.
It does remind me, I got a phone call today of a new partner who's excited to get working. He said, we're excited to stop talking about just alignment and start talking about business outcomes. And I think Trisha just said it best with when you're talking about business outcomes and business goals and you're aligning the technology to it, it makes a difference rather than just saying to the partner, well, we want you to be more aligned. Well, they want to know that that's because it helps them with an outcome, not because they want to be more aligned. Wow, we made it straight up till 4, so or 3 at some people's houses and 2 at other people's houses. So that's excellent. Well, I appreciate everybody being here. You know where to find us. Should you need us for anything, we are more than happy to hop on calls and chat through any of these pieces. Anybody else have anything before we go? Don't forget, next week it's Bob Coppage with Co-Managed IT. So if you are not the person that wants to hear that, but someone else on your team is, feel free to invite more. I think he and Alex will have good conversations around that.
Looking forward to it. There'll at least be some chatter around beards. I'm trying to catch him.
Always chattered around beards. I'm
Trying
glad
to catch him. His is still better than mine.
I'm glad it's the 2 of you. I'm not involved in that. I feel like that would be a big loss on my end. Thank goodness, really.
All right, guys, take care. We'll see everybody next week.
A good one.